Hello, everyone. This is Ron Gerber from AngelBeat. I'm so glad that Dave from Datrium could join us. Dave's one of the top engineers, technical experts with Datrium, covering major organizations in Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, and other locations in the beautiful Mountain Time Zone. And one of the big things that I hear a lot about at our live AngelBeat events, which we hopefully will continue in the future, is how do you go about tying together disaster recovery with your AWS cloud strategy? So many organizations use VMware, which can also affect your DR and business continuity plans. And DRaaS has a really cool solution that ties that all together. And one of the things that I'm seeing so much, and the unfortunate COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated this, is that it's really hard and difficult for people to really allocate time and effort to doing disaster recovery, business continuity, testing, validation. And so many organizations, even late in 2019, early 2020, were looking at Datrium because they want to focus on more strategic issues and leave it up to Datrium to make sure that their DR business continuity strategies, platforms work seamlessly so they can focus on more strategic issues. And I think that mindset is only going to accelerate in the future. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Dave to go through this very innovative solution in depth.
Fantastic, Ron. Thank you so much. And I want to thank everyone for taking the time to view this webinar. What we're going to cover today is, as Ron detailed, is a new, really breakthrough, from my perspective, approach to managing disaster recovery in the midst of outages. As we know, what we're dealing with today is a different kind of landscape over the last few years. Right now, Datrium commissioned a study, and 50% of the respondents had a DR event in the past 2 years. And what's really intriguing and different now, it's the majority of the biggest impact to IT infrastructures now is not the traditional, what we have seen over the last decade, power outages, natural disasters, and human error. It is now someone at the end of a wire trying to proactively put malware in your system and encrypt your infrastructure and then hold that for ransom. So it's obviously a very new and impactful aspect that is really, if you think about it, someone is proactively 24/7, 365 trying to get into your system. So a lot of analysts say it's not a matter of if, but it's when something happens, and then you have to really look at how you can quickly approach that or recover from the environment. So that's what we're going to really be focused on today. General outages, but really how Datrium can really help you look at recovering from ransomware in a very holistic and open approach. So what has hampered traditional disaster recovery? I've been working in the industry, in IT industry and enterprise for 20 years now, and it's certainly the associated cost. It's not just the acquisition cost to put something into place, but it's also the operational cost around a DR infrastructure, including the secondary site and how that can be managed. It's the lack of the skill set to successfully manage all the different components that are required for DR. So if you think about a layered, application stack, and, DR is one of those applications as a separate management interface, that then you have to have a secondary site that you need to manage, and you need to manage the connections and the replication. And that's just getting the data to that, to the DR location. The most challenging aspect of that is the last portion here, is the difficulty of testing those DR solutions and plans and making sure that they're consistent I like to say a DR plan is only as good as the last time it was compliance checked against the run book that you have developed for it. So how often as a business, if you have a DR infrastructure in place, a DR plan, a run book, how often do you get to test that? And you have to look at it, how much of that testing or the run book is actually manual effort. Because we know if there's manual effort, if there's notes that have to be taken, manual effort can absolutely inject errors into that DR. So we're really talking about DR orchestration here, and that based on software approaches for that DR orchestration. So if you look at it, part of our poll, you know, we got back that I think the burden of that secondary infrastructure is really one of the key aspects that really needs to be addressed. So our respondents said 88% of them would really like to use the public cloud if they could pay on demand for those resources. So if you have to think about it, how can you truly establish that? Your data is on your on-premises site. You only want to pay for utilization of the cloud resources to run your workloads when a DR is actually, you know, called for. How would you kind of connect those two aspects? To me, you know, being in Arizona, I kind of envision it to, I'm on the south rim, and somehow I want to connect those miles over to the north rim immediately, because that's my disaster recovery. How can I stitch that together if my data's on one part of the rim and I have to get it over to the other, and I don't want to spin up resources on the other side until I need to? So that is what Datrium has solved, really. So we have what's called the Datrium Disaster Recovery as a Service. And I think what's fundamental to first appreciate is the unique expertise that the Datrium founders have brought to the industry and their perspective and mindset, which has allowed them to take this unique view through a very wide lens of disaster recovery and determine really, again, a fundamental breakthrough approach to delivering backup as a service, extending into DR as a service. So our backgrounds, our founders founded Data Domain, the first commercially viable deduplication appliance on the market. Hugo Patterson invented SnapVault, which today is still known as the premier storage-based snapshots. And Boris and Ganesh in the front row there were the principal engineers working with Diane Green back in the day. So what our founders have done is taken our VMware expertise, taken our backup and recovery expertise, and how to integrate it with the VMware system, and have developed what we call Datrium Disaster Recovery as a Service. So we're going to go through some high-level slides of what Datrium DRaaS is, and then we're going to go into a real demo of the environment. So what is Datrium DRaaS, or Disaster Recovery as a Service? It is first public cloud backup that you can have instant RTO on. This is a very unique approach, unique solution that Datrium has, and we're going to go over that in detail to make sure it's fully appreciated, because the data is there. Now the question is, how do I instantiate that data into my disaster recovery infrastructure? So if you think about this in the context of ransomware, there's a lot of forensics that have to take place. You have to go back to different points in time to determine when was that key pulled from the system, and your file started to be encrypted. You also have to appreciate ransomware, the authors, the developers of ransomware, it's a business, and what they're starting to target now is the enterprise side and enterprise infrastructures, meaning they're looking at encrypting backups first, because they know that the backup is the safety net. And if they remove that safety net first, then there's no other points to go back to. It puts that customer paints them firmly into a corner of, I can't go to my backups, my primary is now encrypted as well. I can't recover my data without paying the Bitcoin to get the key to unlock the data. So you have to think about it. You have to have the ability to do very fast recoveries to different points in times as part of that forensics. When were my files first encrypted? When did that malware first take place? And if you can go back and easily go back to different points in times and do that kind of forensic work very quickly, that really enables you to fight against ransomware. And the last part of it is what I mentioned before, this continuous compliance. So what is the Datrium DRaaS? The components of it is that a Datrium connector is downloaded to your existing VMware environment. It doesn't matter the infrastructure makeup of that environment. It could be, you know, block SAN delivering the underlying storage and NAS, any hyperconverged solution on the market they can think of, or any DHCI solution in the market. We can also protect, if you have invested in the VMware Cloud and AWS already, you have to be cognizant of there can be failures within Amazon AWS availability zones. This can also be used to provide disaster recovery across availability zones if one AZ does go down. So you download the connector into your VMware environment. You create a global backup and DR policy based on your service level agreements for the applications. And we'll actually be stepping through this. Datrium then, via the connector, stores all the backups on S3. It is done in our file system approach. We just don't store VMware data in an S3 bucket and kind of leave it dangling. That connector is actually a worker thread, and this is all delivered as a service. And you'll see that as we navigate into the demo and actually go into the your self-service portal, where you can see your infrastructure, develop your protection groups, and run books for your DR. And then lastly, as part of calling a DR, the VMware Cloud on AWS, which we think is just a fantastic approach to leveraging the public cloud. For the Datrium DRaaS approach, you only need to deploy that on demand when you need to call a DR, when a DR event actually happens. If you're not in the DR event, simply that is your steady state that you're running with. When you need to call a DR event, then that's when you instantiate that VMware Cloud. So if you take a look at this again through high levels, you're in the steady state, you have an outage. When disaster strikes, we have, and we'll go through this, you have already established that run book, you instantiate that VMware Cloud, and the one-click instant failover will, through approach that we call live mount, will allow the VMware Cloud to instantly spin up and power up the VMs that are still residing on S3. That is a very key important component of this solution. Data does not need to be hydrated, moved to start disaster recovery. So we are able to live mount that data. We create an NFS mount directly into the SDDC data store, and through our DR orchestration, we automatically power those VMs on. No data movement has to take place. So if you think about it, those different points in time, you're impacted by ransomware. I want to, select a different point in time, and you'll see that as we go through the actual demo, I can select different recovery points in time. I can instantly bring up those VMs. That allows me to do that quick forensics on my actual applications. Now, even I would say maybe more importantly, failback. This is an important question to ask any vendor you're talking to concerning a DR solution. How do I fail back? And more importantly, the critical question is, can I fail back from the public cloud? Because if conversion of the VM is part of that failover process, and what I mean is some disaster recovery solutions will take the actual VM image and they'll convert it to a native cloud format. So AMI, Amazon Machine Image in AWS. Now, all of a sudden, your management paradigm has completely changed. you are now having to manage your infrastructure through the Amazon web portal, through the AWS web portal. You're managing EC2 instances. You know, what are you doing as far as HA? Can you be able to have any type of HA in the environment? What if pieces of the Amazon or AWS go down, which again, they can and they do. That's why we rely on the VMware Cloud in AWS, which has that built-in resiliency because it is the VMware Cloud itself. So if you can't fail back, if you can't take that image which was converted into an AMI and then bring it back to your on-premises system and your VMware system, I think that's a significant consideration to take in a point. So yes, we actually have one-click failback as well, where any new data what was created when you're running in a DR state will then be captured. We actually create another recovery point within our S3 bucket that we're managing for you and have the replication back to on-premises that allows you then to do the failback. So very, very differentiated in the market today. Okay, oh yeah, the last part of it before we actually go into the demonstration itself is around compliance of the plan. Again, you know, the compliance or runbook you can only be as confident in as the last time was compliance checked, because things will drift out of compliance. You know, replication may break or recovery points may not be there. Resources on the on-premises side may be changed. And if you're not aware of that, if you're not connecting that with the impact to the runbook, you can have a point in time where you need to call a DR event, but your runbook is not compliant when it was first created. So part of the Datrium DRaaS is every 30 minutes we do a compliance check and we send out alerts if even, you know, if any drift, if we detect any drift, or if anything, even if it's a good compliance check, obviously we'll send that out. So Ron, I just want to verify, can you indeed see my control shift dashboard?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Okay,
yes,
okay. I just want to
sorry.
verify.
I just
changed the screen
unmuted me for a second.
Okay.
Yes, I can see your dashboard. Can you
Thank
see it
you.
as well, Lauren?
Yep. I can.
All right.
Wow.
Fantastic. Yeah, I just wanted to verify this, you know, I want to make sure we're jumping into the demo here. So we're moving from the actual PowerPoint slides into a live system. So this is the Datrium DRaaS dashboard. This is the SaaS portal. It goes by the name of Control Shift. What you first can see is the infrastructure makeup. So you can see there's 2 on-premises sites that I'm going and replicating to Cloud DVX. Cloud DVX is that S3 repository of the backups that we are storing for you, independent of what we can see here to the right of that, which is the SDDC. So again, this is a demo. We have the SDDC already deployed because we don't want to, you know, pause the demo waiting for the SDDC to be deployed. So we have it pre-deployed. But again, the important aspect is that SDDC only needs to be deployed when a DR event has been called, and that's the only time you start incurring costs for that. And when your DR event is over, you just simply tear down, you run your failback runbook, and then you can tear down the SDDC and you stop incurring costs for the environment. What we're going to focus on here is really creation of those protection groups that we've talked about. So here, these are, just think of a protection group as simply as a backup policy. I give it a name. I say what site I'm protecting. So this is the vCenter infrastructure that I'm protecting. And then I attach VMs, I associate VMs with this protection group running on this VMware cluster. And I can use name pattern matching, and we're adding tags as well. So we can use VMware tags to be able to include and even exclude. So just think of this as a search string that you can, you know, put the actual details on to be able to determine exactly what VMs you're going to pull into your environment. The other very interesting aspect here is, as long as you maintain the standard naming convention for your VMs, when a VM is created in your VMware on-premises infrastructure, that VM will be included in the associated protection group. So here, I'm just doing a DB asterisk, and you could see I'm pulling in all the VMs that match that naming convention. So the very interesting and ease of workflow use of this is that as long as you maintain that standard naming convention, you build your protection groups based on that. When you go in, your VM admin, your application owner creates a new VM, it'll be included in those protection groups automatically. It's not something you have to create another ticket for within your infrastructure. It'll be done automatically. Now, here's where you actually determine your protection schedules. So this one I'm doing every 4 hours. I'm keeping a snapshot for 2 days. You can make that for as long as you may need for your SLAs and your retention for the environment, from weeks to months to years based on that requirement. So this is the protection group. This allows you then to pull data back from your backup as a service cloud DVX, but more importantly, in the context of what we're going to be looking through here, is actually executing a disaster recovery plan based on that protection group. So the really interesting aspect for me is working in the industry for so long is that backup and disaster recovery were kind of thought as two separate kind of activities or components, and there were two different ancillary pieces of software that were used for backup, one for backup, one for DR. What Datrium is doing with DRaaS, we're extending backup and protection groups into actual DR itself. So we're going to look at just the applications DVX. This is a run book that we've established for failover. So you give the plan a name, the description, and here we support different failover types, but what we're going to be focused on is a failover to SDDC on the VMware Cloud. So that's the type. You can see if I would click the wrong failover type, that we're doing real-time compliance checks. So my sites is no longer compatible with the recovery type that I've selected here. So select that back and you'll see we do the real-time compliance checks, and now I have the green check marks across the board. We're determining the protected site, the failover site, so this is the SDDC, the software-defined data center that you saw on the display, and the backup is from the Cloud DVX. Now we're selecting the protection group. We went through the definition of protection groups for backup. Now we're selecting or extending that backup capability into DR. So I'm selecting the applications DVX protection group as part of that. From here forward, we're doing mappings. We're doing mappings from the on-premises source to the target, which is the VMware Cloud and AWS. So we're selecting the destination data store. We're selecting the destination target vCenter. And this is the VMware Cloud vCenter on AWS. So this is not an on-premises vCenter. And you can see we're not working at all with any on-premises vCenter. We're going to be launching next into the VMware Cloud vCenter, because in this context, a DR event, my vCenter may be completely down, my on-premises one. I may not be able to access it. So we're not even going to that vCenter, because going through this, the demonstration is going to be actual failover. We're doing the mappings of the vCenter folders from the source to the destination, compute resources, virtual networks. If we need to do any IP rescheming based on ranges, address, subnet mask, gateways, DNS servers, we can do this as part of the run book. So part of the DRaaS solution, the run book, we will actually go into the applications, into the VMs, the Linux, Windows VMs, and we will do the IP rescheming based on the selection here. If there's any scripts that you need to run pre or post the run book, we can actually inject those scripts as well to run. And then here you see the recovery steps. We're going to take that application protection group. We're going to bring it up in the application stack, a database, web server, file share, and then the final desktop. Now here's where we really look at the compliance checking. So I can select if I want to be alerted every compliance check, compliance warning, compliance error once per week. The whole kind of aspect here is more and more, we're seeing customers that need to have an audit-ready kind of repository of compliance, because maybe they're getting cyber insurance, and part of that cyber insurance is, what are you doing to be able to address recovery? We're not just gonna, you need to show that you're doing something on your end before you provide insurance. So this compliance check that is sent out every 30 minutes, and then we'll go to this right away, does send out the report. So you can see this is the compliance report, and these are all the different configurations, both source and target, that are checked every 30 minutes. So my advice is you just do some email filtering on these. If it's a good compliance check and it says it's passed, you then filter that based on your email rules into your audit-ready compliance repository. If any compliance check fails, put that, send that to your system admin distribution list. So whoever's on call at that point in time, whoever's monitoring alerts can look at it and can start to investigate and remediate the runbook drifting out of compliance immediately. So it's not a concept where we're getting ready to run the DR runbook, and all of a sudden it's not compliant anymore. So that's built up from how we're doing protection from the environment, how we're populating the data into the Cloud DVX S3. Now we're going to actually go and instantiate these VMs via this runbook in the protection group into the VMware Cloud and AWS. So first, I just want to show you, this is the actual vCenter of VMware Cloud. We're going to take this runbook and actually do a test failover plan. So again, what I said before, that you may not want to go to the latest retention point. You may want to do some forensics, go to other points in time and do a quick restore of those and do the forensics work on that. So that allows you to, again, select the snapshot that we're having for you out of that S3 bucket. We can select our execution settings. Another key aspect here is we can leave those VMs for forensics in Cloud DVX. So we don't have to do a full storage vMotion into the SDDC. The VMs will be up and running automatically, and they'll actually be running out of your S3 repository. We're going to preview the steps, which we saw before as we looked through the runbook, and we're actually going to execute this plan itself. So this doesn't change anything as we're going through a test plan. It doesn't change anything on the production environment. If this was a true failover, yes, you would execute the failover aspect of the plan, but we're just doing a test failover. So you can see we're retrieving these snapshots from the actual S3 repository. We'll jump into the vCenter itself. And you can see now my VMs are already being instantiated, registered within vCenter, and being powered on. So this is the key component that we've talked about live mount before. Data is within your Cloud DVX in your S3 repository. We're taking the version within the protection group stack, the retention points that you want to utilize for recovery, and we're automatically providing that as a live mount via the NFS mount to the VMware environment and instantiating those VMs. And you can see they're now coming up, powering up and running. And now I can attach to them and do my forensics work or call my DR successful. Now it allows me to go back and start remediating my on-premises. Again, the very breakthrough aspect of it, as the integral component of it, there is no paradigm shift in how I'm managing the environment. I'm going from my on-premises vCenter, I'm going into my control shift SaaS portal, I'm launching my vCenter, my vSphere vCenter, and running that runbook, and now I'm live running within my VMware Cloud and AWS. No data movement has had to take place at all. So very cool. So we'll say, well, we're done. Well, we're still in the testing period here. We haven't quite completed with the aspect. But as soon as this testing is done, I can come into and clean up this test. And that test, the cleanup of the test, will automatically then go and delete the VMs, recover the space, and you can go then after that point and tear down the SDDC. Okay, we are completed now. We'll actually go here and do a cleanup test. And you'll see once we start that, we'll go back into the vCenter, and you see we're now deleting the virtual machines. Virtual machines are done. We can now delete the SDDC and no longer incurring costs. So we're only incurring those costs of the VMware Cloud and AWS, those compute memory resources, those host resources in the VMware Cloud when we're actually in a DR event. So very, very cool and breakthrough. So to summarize, kind of jumping back into the presentation, just one reference, we've had a large government agency that had, you know, the stacks that we've talked about before. They had the HCI, they were using, you know, traditional backup environment, which is, I have this discrete backup environment, which I'm using. And then they had another layer of software on top of that for disaster recovery. And again, their backup environment didn't have an integration with the disaster recovery environment. They couldn't take the concepts of how they're using backup and extending that for disaster recovery. And also the VMs had to be refactored. They had to be converted to the native cloud format. And that left them stuck within that native cloud format and not able to get back to on-premises. So this customer chose Datum, the simplicity, the instant RTO, what you just saw, our ability to do the live mount to the SDDC data store, immediately start up those VMs, and the overall 80% savings in TCO. To summarize, really, again, the recovery, instant recovery from you know, ransomware is absolutely critical for any environment. And I take a look at it again, you know, bad actors are proactively trying to get into your system. They're looking at first encrypting your safety net, your backups. If they can do so, then they know they have you painted in that corner. For Datum, you can have that instant recovery in the worst case situation of a disaster, and really that is, you know, the ransomware attack. So zero copy, no hydration. The backups in S3 are immutable. You can't get to them from a bad actor malware running within your environment, and we can scale up to the, you know, 1, 2, 3 to thousands of VMs within your environment. So we do have a lot of collateral next steps. Certainly from my perspective as a sales engineer, you know, please reach out. You can simply go to datum.com, request a demonstration, and happy, very, very happy to kind of take you through a personalized journey and show you kind of a more tailored demonstration for your environment. But we have a lot of ransomware protection pages, stories, blog posts, as well as a landing page for our VMware Cloud and AWS disaster recovery as a solution. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time today. I hope you found this beneficial. Ron, thank you for the opportunity to present to your audience. I appreciate it.
Oh, that's great. Thank you very much. And I've just been texting David, who's one of the key hybrid cloud DR experts in Canada, who's got a lot of interest in this for his clients and for anyone in the future. Again, you'll be watching this on demand, but you can always go to datrium.com or angelbeat.com and make sure that any and all future questions are answered. I just think as I reflect on this, I can only imagine how many thousands of man hours went in behind the scenes to make all this work, between Datrium's engineers, coordination with AWS, coordination with VMware. And I think that, you know, the key takeaway when I look at this is I'm trying to think, my God, how hard would it be for me as an end user to try and achieve that same level of support and services? Why don't I just make my life a lot easier, make sure that, be it for hurricanes, be it for business continuity, be it for dealing with ransomware, be it to quickly having to re-architect your computing because of pandemic and quickly switching all of your employees to work from home. I mean, this kind of technology is really cool because you get it right. It's so strategically important. And quite honestly, it's just a royal pain in the neck for so many people to actually go through the critically important DR testing. And now you really don't have to do that. You just configure it once and Datrium's got it done for you. Is that
That
about
is
right,
Ron.
Dave?
That is right, Ron. Absolutely. And what you don't see at all is the back end SDDC configuration that we take care of for you. When you go to deploy your SDDC, you have all that API integration. So it is simply the management paradigm, right, doesn't change. You're managing your VMs on vCenter on premises. You call disaster recovery. You're managing your VMs in the VMC cloud and AWS with vCenter. It's that simple.
Good. Well, this is very interesting. I hope all of you who are listening in right now take full advantage of it. And for those in the future, once you listen to this, please make sure that you follow up with AngelBeat or the folks in Datrium. And I know, and let me ask you this question to you, Dave, even though you spoke about the way this works with AWS, maybe you could just share a little bit if people are using other clouds or multi-cloud. I'm assuming that Datrium, if not today, very soon, will give people a flexibility that you're not limited only to organizations that only use Amazon.
Well, that's true, Ron. I would say from one perspective of it's just VMware. So it doesn't matter what cloud is actually running on. Because
Okay,
we really abstract that what cloud is it running on from you. I mean, we do focus, it's in S3, but again, there is no Amazon or AWS portal credentials that you need to even utilize. You don't even have an AWS portal to log into. It is simply VMware.
Okay, I think that's a good point.
Does
Maybe
that make
that's
sense?
yes, and I think that's a good way to lead people is that since everyone just about uses VMware,
Exactly.
Datrium uses AWS as part of its almost back-end invisible capabilities, but regardless of whatever platforms that you're currently using, it really doesn't matter because
right.
you being Datrium can make it work for all organizations, regardless of whatever vendors are currently using. The key strategic benefit is, again, don't worry about DR. It will actually work when you need it, and focus during normal operating times on more strategic issues. And then if God forbid,
Absolutely.
you're living in Salt Lake City, which is another city that David covers, there's a huge snowstorm. You've got to quickly reconfigure things. It's done almost with a click of a mouse. Or similarly, if you're where I am on the East Coast, if there's hurricanes or other issues such as the pandemic that have frustrated people, again, you've got that flexibility. That's, I think, a good point.
Absolutely.
I just want to leave everyone with.
Absolutely, Ron.
Okay, excellent. Well, I hope everyone is well. We encourage you to take full advantage of all the online capabilities offered by AngelBeat, the outstanding speakers we have and experts like Dave to make this happen. I wish all of you the best, and I'm going to end the webinar now. Thank you all very much.